Think back to the closest you have ever come to dying. A car that ran a red light, missing your door by a fraction of an inch. A childhood fall that should have snapped your neck, but instead only left a bruise. A sickness that inexplicably vanished just as the doctors gave up hope. Your brain is hardwired to process these events as luck. It is a psychological defense mechanism. You convince yourself that the laws of probability simply favored you in that exact microsecond. But what if probability had nothing to do with it? What if, in the original, primary sequence of events, you did not survive? What you experienced as a miracle was not luck. It was the system encountering a fatal error and aggressively rerouting your consciousness to an active server where your avatar remained intact. Today's file is pulled from the deep logs. The subject, whose identity has been permanently scrubbed from the primary database, describes a night that fractured his understanding of existence. It was 2:14 a.m. on a lonely stretch of highway in the Pacific Northwest. He was driving a mid-sized sedan, returning from a grueling 14-hour shift. The environment was rendering perfectly. The rain, the fatigue, the grip of the steering wheel, the simulation was flawless. As he approached a blind curve, a heavy utility truck crossed the double yellow line. The driver of the truck had fallen asleep. The subject was traveling at 60 miles per hour. The truck was doing 70. The combined impact speed was 130 miles per hour. A kinetic energy transfer that guarantees immediate, catastrophic structural failure of both the vehicle and the human body. He remembers the initial physics, the sound of the radiator shattering. He remembers the steering column violently breaking his ribs and compressing his lungs. He felt the exact, excruciating moment his physical vessel was destroyed. And then, the rendering engine simply stopped. There was no white light. There were no deceased relatives waiting to guide him. There was no heaven and there was no hell. There was only the backstage of reality. He found his consciousness suspended in an infinite, freezing darkness. He had fallen out of bounds. And as his perception adjusted to the void, he saw the machinery that runs our lives. He described it as a structure of incomprehensible scale, a colossal, rotating water wheel, extending upward and downward into infinity. But this wheel did not churn water. It churned realities. Its blades were made of countless panes of glass, and trapped within each pane was a slightly different iteration of the universe. The system had lost his physical body, but his data, his consciousness, remained active. The system cannot delete an active user. It must find a host. It initiated an emergency data transfer. The massive wheel turned. A pane of glass swung down from the void and crashed into his raw consciousness. For a fraction of a second, he lived reality number 2. The fuel line ruptured. He burned alive, pinned beneath the dashboard. The timeline ended in death. The code was rejected. The wheel turned again. Another pane of glass shattered against his mind. He felt the icy water filling his lungs as the car sank into a ravine. Reality number 3. Fatal error. Code rejected. This process repeated. Dozens, perhaps hundreds of times. The system forcefully rammed his consciousness into timeline after timeline, forcing him to experience every agonizing variation of his death. It was a cold, brutal, algorithmic search for a compatible save file. It did not care about his pain. It only cared about finding a timeline where the probability of survival was greater than 0. He blinked and he was sitting in his car. His hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles were white. He was completely unharmed. He stepped out into the rain. The road ahead was entirely empty. The logging truck was gone. The system had found a timeline where the truck driver woke up a microsecond earlier and corrected his steering. The system then forcefully downloaded the subject's consciousness into the surviving avatar. He drove home in silence, rationalizing it as a microsleep hallucination. But the true horror did not begin on the highway. It began the next morning. Data transfers are rarely perfect. When you move a massive file from one drive to another, packets of data get lost. Minor details are corrupted. The next day, he visited his parents' house. He patted the family dog, a golden retriever. But his memory, clear as day, told him they had owned a Labrador. He asked his sister about it. She looked at him with genuine confusion, her eyes a deep, solid brown. He felt a cold sweat break out on his neck. Her eyes had always been bright green. Over the next few weeks, the rendering errors piled up. A scar he had carried on his left thumb since childhood was gone. A close friend he remembered lending money to had moved away 5 years ago and hadn't spoken to anyone since. He did not lose his mind. Medical scans proved his brain was perfectly healthy. He is simply a stowaway. A ghost that hijacked a living body in a universe that does not belong to him. In theoretical physics, this is known as quantum immortality. The theory posits that from the perspective of the conscious observer, your probability of survival is always 100%. The universe will endlessly fracture and branch off to prevent your localized consciousness from shutting down. If this is true, and my archives strongly suggest it is, the implications are horrifying. It means death only exists for the spectators. To everyone else in his original timeline, that man died in a horrific crash. They mourned him. They buried him. But he never experienced it. We view immortality as a gift. But under this system, it is a localized prison. It means you will survive every accident, every illness, every close call, continually being pushed into increasingly unlikely and unfamiliar realities. You will watch everyone around you die, because in your timeline, you are the only constant. You are an imposter, surrounded by people who look and sound like your loved ones, but are ultimately just slightly altered variants generated by a new server. When you survive the unsurvivable, you don't get a second chance. You just get a new map with the same old code. If you have a memory that nobody else shares, if you have a scar you don't remember getting, do not ask too many questions. The system hates anomalies, and you don't want to see what happens when the wheel decides to turn again. Log file closed.